We stay with the flag. The Equality Court declaring the gratuitous display of the apartheid flag as hate speech. It ruled this amounted to unfair discrimination and harassment.
Well, the Nelson Mandela Foundation took it to court on a hate speech basis. AfriForum challenged the move, saying it will violate a freedom of speech.
For some South Africans, this flag represents the worst excesses of apartheid. It was a symbol of oppression, division, and white supremacy.
For me, it evokes emotions of when I was 10 years old, when I was a child, just a 10-year-old who was then called the K word. And my mother and my brother had to explain what that meant. And today, when you see that flag, you don't even have to think twice about it. It then takes you back there.
It reminds us from the back days where we have been oppressed and carrying the passes, and it's an insult to democracy.
Others believe it remains a slice of history.
It's heritage to us. We grew up with it, so why take it away from us? It's part of South Africa.
The issue finally ended up here in the Equality Court.
In terms of Section 21(2) of the Equality Act, it is declared that, subject to the proviso in Section 12 of the Equality Act, any display of the old flag constitutes A. hate speech in terms of Section 10(1) of the Equality Act, B. unfair discrimination on the basis of race in terms of Section 7 of the Equality Act, C. harassment in terms of Section 11 of the Equality Act. There is no order as to costs. I hand down the judgment.
The ruling does not ban the flag. It simply limits the use.
What it means is that you cannot gratuitously display it. In other words, you can use it for artistic purposes. You can use it if there's a drama at school to then bring out what it meant to be working under this. But you can use it in terms of movies, also for academic purposes. But to then display it in a place where it causes displeasure, it causes harm to those who actually see it, you then are running the risk of what the judge said. It is not to imprison you, but to then come out with other methods.
Lobby group AfriForum argues that this judgment alone will not promote social cohesion.
If the judgment is simply that displaying a symbol is hate speech, or hate speech because of the fact that it is very offensive, that is something that we take issue with. So our preliminary reaction would be that we do not agree with the judgment. We do not agree that it would solve the issues that the Nelson Mandela Foundation are trying to solve.
So it's a case of out with the old and in with the flag that symbolizes the country's unity, diversity, and centuries of struggle. Hasina Gori, SABC News, High Court in Johannesburg.
Now let's have a discussion on that now. Luzuko Koti, who is a communications manager at the Nelson Mandela Foundation, joins us now in studio. Very good evening to you, Luzuko. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Quite a victory for you and I guess for the face of South Africa's democracy. I guess let's talk about why you took this particular issue up in the first place.
I think this is good news for South Africa. It is good news because a lot of South Africans would like to see a South Africa that moves forward. It is not something that we see as victory because we didn't want a particular victory in this. We wanted to make sure that South Africa's instruments are used to strengthen this democracy. And one of those instruments are the legal tools that we have, our courts and, of course, our laws. And I think this is particularly a conversation starter for South Africans. South Africans must start to ask themselves many questions as to where do we want to build, where do we want this country to go and how do we want to build this country? And can we use this judgment, for instance, by Judge Mujapelo as a building block in building that South Africa. It's not about they've lost, we have won. It is about making clear that certain things can be done, but certain things can be done under certain circumstances. This is why we say it's not a victory. It's probably a very good step forward, and we celebrate today Kathrada's birthday. He would have been 90 today. We now say, with this, we dedicate it to him, to say the 26 years he spent in prison in Robben Island, and of course the entire life he dedicated to the liberation of South Africa was not in vain, that today a court in South Africa can actually find in favor of the people of South Africa, and of course in favor of the kind of order that we had sought when we started this process.
Yeah, the ruling specifically talks about the gratuitous display of the apartheid flag. And, you know, I have to ask, while this ruling can be seen against a particular grouping of people in South Africa who used the apartheid flag for that kind of display, I mean, is this a test case for the Nelson Mandela Foundation? Because, I mean, there are other instances where, for example, there's race baiting that is used in South Africa currently today. If we look at the political landscape, for example, in South Africa, is this a test case for other issues that you perhaps want to take up in future?
Look, we continue our effort to try and start conversations and processes that are going to help us deal with the wounds of the past. We know that South Africans are walking around carrying wounds, painful, some of them still bleeding. People who've lost families, who've lost their self-identity, who've lost the hope of living in a liberated country, simply because some people keep flying in their face the same scars that they endured in the days of apartheid. And we want, as the Nelson Mandela Foundation, to be seen as a platform or institution that provides a platform for conversation, for dialogue. We don't want to, we're not taking these up so that things are criminalized, so that people now feel that they have no particular sense of freedom to express themselves in a particular way. But we're saying, let us be conscious that you don't exist in a vacuum. You live in a society that is shared with people who've gone through a very painful past. And therefore, if you fly a flag of apartheid, whether it was, of course, enacted in 1928, and therefore apartheid started much later, the fact is that flag is very much a symbol of apartheid. Hence, the United Nations declared apartheid as a crime against humanity. And therefore, that flag represents that in our eyes, in the eyes of many people who've gone through that pain. So it's not necessarily a test case for anything, but it is actually, as I said earlier, a building block towards building a nation that we want to leave our children behind. And I do think that if we start that conversation now, we will know what kind of issues can we engage on? What are the issues we need to leave behind? And nobody said this flag is banned, as we have said, as you have seen in your clip, that this is a conversation about how do we use that flag in a way that builds this country. Let's remind ourselves, because memory is important in building a country. Let us use it for artistic purposes. Let us use it for journalistic purposes. But let us not fly it in the face of those who are still trying to heal after so many years of pain.
It symbolizes, of course, apartheid. It symbolizes a very dark past. But where I perhaps would want to ask pertaining to this particular ruling is on the issue of you can't really police. There's no banning pertaining to the flag.
Absolutely.
But it's all about a mindset change, I guess, of those who continue to use the flag for particular instances that may be hurtful to a certain grouping of people in South Africa. But how do you then police those who continue to use it in their homes? It's about a mindset change. Ultimately, at the end of the day, yes, you can remove it, the gratuitous display of it, but if somebody prefers to put it in their homes, you're not changing much. The mindset doesn't change.
Look, Cressida, what we did here, you must remember what inspired this move, and which, of course, is something that we had been studying for a while. But what really pushed us to the point where we take this action was when people were fighting for a very, very just cause. You know, farmers were being victims of crime in many communities in South Africa, and we know how much we want to for our industry of farmers to survive. And crime is a problem. But now they went out on Black Monday in 2017 to say, look, we want this thing to be a national conversation. Instead of calling everybody to be part of that conversation, they segregated people by flying this flag in that. Yeah. And we thought this is something that is seeking to divide South Africans instead of bringing them together. Those who have this flag put up in their homes as historical memorabilia, reminiscent of whatever moment in the past. Nowhere in this order does it say they cannot fly this flag or they cannot put it in our homes. But we must remember that those homes sometimes are places of work for other people. Domestic workers come in there.
So that's where I see the problem.
And you have to be sensitive to the fact that this person may be walking into that home, in your home, but in their place of work, and they may be triggered. And that trigger can then open the wounds that are starting to heal. You can't then be ignorant of that if you are a true South African who's very interested in the healing and the building of this country.
AfriForum has a problem with the ruling, says basically it's a setback for freedom of speech. Are you willing to engage with them?
We have extended our hand to the AfriForum. We have said that the Nelson Mandela Foundation is always open to having conversations. We lead by dialogues. We open our platforms for conversations to heal, to bring together parties that don't see eye to eye, that don't want to talk. And we can't then not be willing to be part of that conversation ourselves. So we have extended our hand. But also I think the judge was very clear today to say, if we are true to the preamble of our constitution, where we are intending to build a South Africa that is non-racial and of course non-sexist, that we will all enjoy. Everybody has to find this judgment as a starting point for a conversation to build a country, and therefore we are willing to do that with AfriForum.
All right, thank you very much for your time. I'm afraid that's all we have time for this evening. Luzuko Koti is the Communications Manager at the Nelson Mandela Foundation.